The right thing is knowing what you're doing and the impacts of what you're doing, and knowing where you don't know.
Joe Jack Williams is the head of Regenerative Strategy at Bywater. They specialise in timber construction for their pioneering UK development projects.
We started realising that there's a bit of a gap. We don't really understand the impact of the materials we use. We need to do our best as an industry to say, no, it's definitely safe. You've just got to be on it with timber, and then you can build beautiful buildings which are really low carbon.
From the outside, there's perception over problems with fire, problems with moisture, problems with insurance.
There is a risk about people who don't know how to build in timber, building in timber. I think it's 97% of all timber claims are about moisture. Way more of a risk. That knowledge needs to be percolating through the industry. We're too fragmented. We're not really as good as we should be at sharing. We know about timber, but yeah, our hands are tied by policy, and it's terrible.
Joe Jack, thank you so much for joining us today on the Urban Forecast podcast. So you spent 14 years at FCB, amazing architects, and last year you made the decision to cross over to the developer side, working for Bywater, also an amazing company. Do you want to just tell me, what was the reason? Was there a moment where you realised actually you wanted to work developer side, and what was the reason for that?
Yeah, hi all. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's interesting. FCB is a really special place. Fantastic architectural practice, full of amazing people doing amazing work. And I think over 14 years, we've created some amazing projects. We've created some amazing knowledge. We've shared a lot of knowledge. What I was starting to realise is architects are kind of limited by the brief, and they're always working with the client. So I spend a lot of time, swishing my hair, trying to get clients to do the right thing, and lots did, and that's fantastic. But what I was realizing is actually the impact and the influence I could have on the other side of the table would be far greater. So in some ways there's a bit of a power grab, so I jumped to the other side of the table to have that greater influence at those early stages, and Bywater's a really nice fit for it. We've got a kind of inbuilt sustainability approach, so it was a natural kind of move, and I knew them quite well. We worked on Paradise project together. I think it's really about how to stretch where we are. You must see this quite a bit when you're working on projects and trying to influence clients. Now I'm the voice in the room, but I'm in with the other team, if you like. So it's great. And
you said you were trying to influence clients to do the right thing. What is the right thing?
Yeah, you know what? It's in some ways it's about the right thing. Is actually just knowing what you're doing and the impacts of what you're doing, and knowing where you don't know is just as important. We make so many decisions that are implicit, not explicit, and when you get down this route, you don't necessarily realize that there's a hole in the ground attached to the project you're making. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And very quickly, it could be, pick a really easy example like grid sizes. By picking a bigger grid size, you can increase your carbon footprint by 35%. If you don't know that exists as an issue, then you'd never know you're making the wrong decision. Whereas the right decision is to pick the right grid size for your project, but know that you've got an impact. We're in this kind of position where there's so much knowledge out there, it can be really difficult to know where to start. So ask the questions, and that's the first bit in terms of the right answer.
And when you were at FCB, and I'd imagine now that you're at Bywater, I think research was something that's very important to you.
Yeah.
And specifically, I suppose, research around materials. Do you want to talk a little bit around once you started digging, you started going down that kind of wormhole?
Yeah.
Well, first, what led you down that wormhole, and then what were the really interesting things that you found other than grid sizes?
And grid sizes are bloody exciting. So what's it? So I actually specialised in operational energy. That was where I spent my time. I was really interested about how buildings, cause emissions one way or another. How do you make better buildings? And I started my career back in 2005, right? And it was all about energy back then. And as we started to think more about buildings and how it was working, we started realising that there's a bit of a gap. We don't really understand the impact of the materials we use. So at FCB, I had quite a bit of flex, which was really generous of FCB to think about what those next things could be. And when we were working with Letty, so we spent a long time in Letty thinking about operational energy versus embodied carbon, and we were looking at a decarbonised grid, going, oh, hang on, we're missing a trick. In the near future, embodied carbon is going to be the big deal. And that's really where, for me, that started sort of ticking through. It's really funny, actually. We had a doctorate student back in 2010 called David Hawkins, who's great. He did a whole study about whole life carbon decision making for higher education estates. And it was so complex, I'm not really sure we knew what to do with it at the time. So we sat there, we had this amazing PhD, and we're going, great. And it's not a comment on David's work. It was just a complex topic. It probably took us 7 years to really unpick it. So yeah, I think that's where it came from. And I'm a bit sad that I still do it. I pick up a catalogue and go, well, that looks great. I don't know where it comes from. So it's about understanding supply chains as much as anything.
And I think increasingly in the world of the Building Safety Act, architects are essentially cataloguing. It's very unusual for us to want to do something, unless somebody specifically asks, that isn't quite a standardized product now, because that is tested, and tested systems are what we should be doing. And those tested systems in the catalogue, they don't really tell you about where that materials come from. You've, I think, made your own catalogue, which we're going to talk about later, but let's talk about it now, which we have here. Yep. So the materials book, published by the RIBA.
What a lovely looking book, thank you. And available in all good bookshops.
Yeah, definitely the RIBA bookshop. Do you want to talk about how that, I suppose that maybe is taking some of that work on embodied carbon and sort of trying to make it easily understandable in a sort of catalogue way? Yeah,
so I think, I think to go back to a couple of points, I mean, the materials book was born out of this curiosity. So actually spending time thinking about where materials are from and how we use them correctly. When you think about something like the Building Safety Act, what's really interesting about that is it puts a whole burden on declarations of performance. So when I talk to a lot of people who work on smaller projects and smaller buildings, they might have fantastic natural materials, but it's very much a cottage industry. When we think about the scale of projects we're delivering at FCB, we probably just can't use those materials. We need warranties. It needs to be insurable. It needs to be able to get a mortgage on it or whatever else, And that's really the kind of evolution of the Building Safety Act. We need to do our best as an industry to say, no, it's definitely safe, or it's definitely going to perform exactly as we want it to. So as soon as you start to go down this kind of rabbit warren of like, what's the material? Where is it from? How do I know it's correct? You then start to think about, okay, well, what is a material? Is it good or bad? And we started having this discussion. So I was chatting to Hattie Hartman, my co-editor, about, do people know? And interestingly, I didn't know. Loads of people didn't know. So we put together a nice little panel of people who were experts in their material and edited this book about all these kind of common materials. So it's a kind of very neutral, unbiased approach. It should be fairly easy to read. It's not a page turner, if I'm honest. Don't sit down one day and think, this is what I'm going to read for that train journey. Like, put it on your desk, pick it up. If you're thinking about bricks, have a look at the brick chapter. If you're thinking about glass, pick it up, have a read about the glass chapter. And it should, as you read through each chapter, just take you through what the material's doing. Is it a hole in the ground? Is it a recycled content? Is it a field? Is it a forest? How does it go from there to a factory? How does it turn into a product? And then once you understand that, architects are phenomenally bright. Once they understand the system, they're really good in that system. And that's what it's really trying to do, instead of that systems thinking for materials.
And we should talk a little bit about Bywater. We're working with Bywater, and it's been amazing and
fantastic. It's very good. Fully endorsed.
Do you want to give a bit of a background about them, and then also their current setup?
So Bywater originally was set up by Richard Walker. So he's head of Iceland Foods, really into sustainable materials. If you look at Iceland, they've got rid of, I think it's 90 or 95% of plastic packaging in their products, which is phenomenal. Mostly paper-based. And originally it was looking at sustainable buildings and that kind of move towards what is a sustainable building. And slowly over time it became really focused on timber. So culminating kind of 2019 with the start of the Paradise building down in Lambeth. At the time, I think it was about largest mass timber office in London. Really great building, got completed this year, which I was working on at the time. And Bywater through that then set up a collaboration, a sort of joint venture with Sumitomo Forestry. So Sumitomo Forestry, huge Japanese corporation, sort of $10 billion, 25,000 employees, but they just build in timber. And one of the things they're really interested in, they do all kinds of bits and pieces. They've got forests, they've got panel manufacturers. They're also the largest home builder in Australia. I think they do about 12,000 homes a year as well in the US. And they're really interested in timber as a thing. So when we take the president of Sumitomo Forestry rounds Paradise, he's there, he's touching the columns, he's touching the CLT. He really wants to know what's going on with it. He's like, what's this coating? How did you do that? How's these fit together? He's really engaged. He's not a business manager. He's like a tree acolyte. He's like all over it. So he's great. He's really fantastic. And so they invest in us just to build timber buildings. That's one of the key reasons I moved. So coming back to why did I leave, there's an opportunity here to forward the knowledge in timber construction. And obviously, working with Oli Lowrie, we've got a great project which is, retaining a facade, which is fantastic. I keep that cultural heritage in that local area, but also then rebuilding it with timber. So taking that timber structure and really making so it is going to be a beautiful building. It's obviously, I would say that.
Well, so would I.
I mean, it is fantastic. It really, one of the things about building with timber is you've just got to be on it with timber. You've got to understand how it works. You've got to understand how to build with it. And then you can build beautiful buildings which are really low carbon. So timber, typically lower carbon than steel and concrete. You can get low carbon concrete. You can get low carbon steel. But it means already we're way ahead in terms of embodied carbon. So it's fantastic. I mean, I don't know how you find building with timber.
Well, I mean, I love it. I love I worked for 10 years at Archetype, so timber's in my blood. And we did lots of timber frame and panelized timber frame mostly, and a bit of CRT. And so the interesting thing about Bywater is that it's not. So the project we're working on is cross laminated, but that's not necessarily like the default. So it has to, but it must be timber, It doesn't have to be, because you have to, I think, be realistic and look at everything at every point. But there's always going to be a presumption in favour of a timber solution. Yeah,
we're super pragmatic. We're not. It's not timber at the expense of profit. It's timber and profit. We're still a business. We still need to make returns. We still need to feed the beast. We're still a business. So it's a really interesting thing. If you consider timber from the outset, more often than not, you can break even. There's no additional cost uplift. You really have to work hard. And what we have at Bywater is a team of people who work across offices, work across residential buildings, delivering whatever the right timber solution is. So for I work in Tanner Street, that's CLT, and I think there's a bit of glulam as well. We have another project in Kingston at the minute, which is a kind of timber stick system. And it's finding that right system. And it's not as simple as saying, it's this type of building, it's this type of material. It's about the size and scale of it. It's about the location. It's about what the design team need from it. So, it's really interesting. I think all of our buildings, we've got a portfolio of I think it's 7 or 8 at the minute. They're all using a different system. So we know exactly costs, how it all works. It's really exciting.
And I think the interesting thing is about your kind of JV with Sumitomo is that you would have assumed that they would then be the supplier of the timber, but they're not, because they just want their sort of mandate, I suppose, with Bywater is, I don't want to get this wrong, it's not every building needs to be timber. It's more timber in every building. Is that right, or have I got that wrong?
I mean, so when we go to board to talk about a project, we've got a beautiful building, we're going to acquire it, we haven't thoughts about what we're going to do. Their questions are, what's the finances, obviously. The second question is, how much timber's in it? And the third question, what's the embodied carbon? Which is amazing for a big company like this. So when we're talking about what the project is, it doesn't need to have timber in it, but it's much easier to get through the board if it has timber. And it is interesting. You can't really buy much Sumitomo timber in the UK and Europe. You can, I think they make some sort of an MDF or a particle board, I think you can pick up. So we're not going to be building that kind of stuff. So typically, again, sourcing, you look at Paradise, that's CLT from Stora Enso, glulam beams from Haslacker, all sourced from Austria. And in some ways, I think Sumitomo said they're the biggest dealer of Stora Enso products in Japan. They're into timber trading, so it's really weird when I first joined. I met up with the guys from Stora Enso, and I was like, "Are we not competitors?" I'm like, no. We work together all the time, and of course they do.
So I think it would be interesting to talk about some of the challenges. I mean, obviously we've just talked about why timber is so great. Let's spend a bit of time on why timber can be challenging. Yeah. So there's, from the outside, there's perception over problems with fire, problems with moisture, problems with insurance.
Okay.
Let's dispel some myths.
Okay, no, perfect. No, this is a great way. So fire is far and away the thing everybody thinks of as an issue with timber. It really isn't that much of a risk, but you do need to be cognizant of it. So when we're looking in offices, it's much easier to have exposed timber. We're probably going to have sprinkler systems. It's a bit more managed. It's definitely doable. Obviously, we build lots of timber buildings. When we look at residential buildings, currently, most of the standard details require it to be fully encapsulated. So you don't get all that beautiful timber. And timber looks great. I mean, that's the key thing with timber. As well as being low carbon, it gives you a really nice warmth, that kind of feel about being in nature. And if you hide it all away, it's difficult. It's not quite the sales pitch. So fire's kind of fine. You can get standard details for it. You can get proven details. You just have to build with those. And if you don't, then you have to pay for fire testing. The bigger thing with fire is really taking your insurers, taking, if it's London Fire Brigade or local fire brigade out, taking building control and taking them on that journey with you so they understand it. I've got a real worry that there is a risk about people who don't know how to build in timber, building in timber, and, that is a potential risk. So what we need to do is spend time with them, taking them through the project, taking them through our expertise as a developer and through our design team's expertise, and then they're able to buy into it and get confidence. What I would say is I think it's 97% of all timber claims, insurance claims, are about moisture. Way, way, way more of a risk. And I think actually the industry's terrible about understanding moisture. I think we have pockets of knowledge, but I don't think we really follow it. So there's a really good report the other day by the government all about external wall insulation, which is saying just how poor a job government-backed insulation was. And it's all about moisture, it's all about mold and detailing. And I don't think that kind of knowledge needs to be, I do think that knowledge needs to be percolating through the industry. So moisture is very manageable at Paradise. When we were building that, we built it in the wettest spring on record, I think, which is a terrible time to build a building in timber. We had guys on site measuring the moisture in the timber to make sure it's drying out. I think they hired 4 people with a wet vac and some brooms to brush standing water off. I think BKS spent £30,000 on tape to seal up joints to stop water getting in. It's a mega amount, but you need to have a moisture plan. Yeah. So it's detailing, it's getting in the weeds, it's collaboration. And it's the same with any of these projects, products. You've got something that's slightly new, you need to take people on that journey and be really kind to them to say, look, I know you're in this little world. I'm going to take you slightly out of your comfort zone, but let me tell you why it's not a risk. And that's kind of our approach.
So there are obviously then a couple of things legislatively that I think make it challenging. So firstly, if you've got any GLA funding, you're not able to use timber as a structural material in London, which seems absolutely mad.
Yeah, it's changing, but not as much as I'd like.
Come on, Sadiq. He said, not on my watch the last time I heard.
Yeah, there's an update that's coming through. So with Built by Nature, we were lobbying them to get it improved. And there is a specific line that they've added which says you can now have timber frames.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
But it's still a bit sloppy in wording. It's still a bit of open interpretation. So there's still a prescription in facades.
Within your external facade, you can't have timber. And that means that even on cross-laminated buildings, your external facade, you're having to do some slight geometrical dances with bits of steel essentially to make it work, and it seems an easy win to reverse that. And I know that. Well, let's talk about a little bit about Built by Nature, and we've had Annalisa from Built by Nature on the podcast as well, talking about the same thing. So it'll be interesting to talk about your involvement with them, and then also how they are advocating for timber.
Okay, so Built by Nature are a fantastic group, and it's a network. It's about community building and about sharing knowledge, which is really useful, and it's pan-European. So because it's pan-European, it means that we've got quite a bit of knowledge, embedded in Amsterdam or embedded in Germany or Scandinavia, because it's always Scandinavia's doing better timber buildings than us. So we can take a lot of their knowledge and their approach and embed it back into the UK. And what we've got in the UK, where Built by Nature are fantastic, is the advocacy at high levels. So the GLA, for instance, there's a really great little report by the GLA, by Built by Nature for the GLA, which is talking about what it should update. It's great. Obviously, they didn't take it all on board, but it's way better than it would have been if we hadn't pushed it.
Yeah.
And it's well funded. It's funded by Lauders Foundation and Ramble Foundation. I think maybe the IKEA Foundation as well, to share that knowledge, because that's what we need. This is the problem with the industry. We're too fragmented. We're not really as good as we should be at sharing.
And quite knee-jerk in terms of the reactions. So that,
right.
As an example, this regulation that prevents you from having timber in the walls, it sort of doesn't make any sense because, I can understand why post-Grenfell, there's lots of concerns about combustible materials within a wall build-up. But if it's encapsulated within two completely fireproof elements, then you would imagine the risk would be mitigated there. And that's just about education. Yeah,
completely. And I think it's one of those things. Timber's taking the hit for a petrol-based product wrapped in aluminium that was basically a failing of testing, and there's some levels of dishonesty perhaps going with it. So, as well as kind of other structural failings about how we build buildings. So timber seems to be the fallout for it. It's really interesting. So a really good example of how it directly impacts us is when we think about our sites and we're trying to acquire a site. We can only build residential buildings at 6 stories. We can't go taller than that currently because of the way the building regs is written. It means that if it's got combustible structural materials, then we have to use BS 9991. BS 9991 was rewritten last year to make sure that as soon as it's a high-risk building, it's not applicable, which leaves us in this kind of weird sweet spot of not being able to build in timber over 6 stories. And we could do it. I think we probably could go through first principles and push it through, but it's a huge risk. And then with the high-risk buildings, gateways, do we really want to spend 40 weeks educating building control and all those kind of other officers involved about how timber buildings work? Not really. It's too much risk for us, right?
Well, because it's a commercial business, even though Sumitomo might be funding some of it. You need a return on your money, and you can't just delay this to try and get through British bureaucracy. Yeah, exactly.
And we. There are projects where we could perhaps underwrite it at 6 stories and maybe then push. But if we're underwriting projects like that, then there's probably another company who would build it in 10 stories in concrete, and they take far less risks, and we've got to try and compete with them. So it's really difficult. So we're nimble. We know about timber, but our hands are tied by policy, and it's terrible.
I want to talk about some other materials as well. I think from some of the work that we've done with you, it's really interesting as an architect, the sort of unintended consequences of some of the decisions you make. Yeah. So we had a discussion about cladding materials, and I think I said to you, well, as long as we don't do aluminium, because aluminium's the worst, right? And you went, well, actually, the thing is, if you go for a different material, then it's the connections that tie back that can actually end up adding more carbon than using a very lightweight material like aluminium. And I was like, oh my God, it's a head scratcher. And
it's really tricky, right? And this is the whole thing. We're always on a learning curve, and it's not always intelligible or intuitive what the right answer is. Yeah. I think if you think about where we were when we talk about operational energy, like 10, 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, it was all a bit unknown, and people were trying to find their feet, and they're going, oh, actually, this window's not a great idea. Maybe we should have a smaller window, or, maybe we do need solar shading. Those ideas take years to sort of build up and understand. And when you look at a building, it's not really clear, it's easy to see the things on the outside and think that's where the carbon is, but actually it really is buried. To go back to the Paradise project, because the numbers are fresh in my head, the facade of that building is about a quarter of the embodied carbon of it. There's this great green ceramic facade on it, these amazing tiles. That is not where the carbon is in our facade. Actually, about 80% of the carbon is in the structure that holds it up. So all of these steel bracketry, aluminium bracketry, that's all sitting within it. And it's because the tiles are so heavy. Now, we need to use tiles for loads of different reasons, because of that longevity. It's next to a railway line. Brake dust is really abrasive. This is the right material to use that situation. But yeah, the carbon's not in the tiles, which surprised me that, they're all shipped from Portugal.
And I think data becomes this really important thing. And I think, it's difficult. I think architects aren't brilliant. And I think the construction industry is not brilliant at using data to inform its decision making. Be that at the start of a project, I don't think we rely enough. If we were all tech entrepreneurs or whatever, we'd be analysing the data first, and then we'd be making a response. Whereas I think architects are designers, and we feel like we're intuitive, and so and that goes to the materials as well. And you might have an intuitive decision making process in your mind that ceramic, natural material, fired okay, but like it's all coming out of the ground, probably quite low in terms of its embodied carbon. But then you've got these very heavy brackets, and so how do you begin to get this data set to inform your decision making?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so what we do at Bywater, and it's something we're trialing and testing differently on different projects. What we have is a sustainability consultant team, which is not just kind of reporting; they're an active part of the team. They should be there to help and support decision making. So it's not just cost; it's not just about buildability. They'll be telling us exactly what the embodied carbon implications are. So we have a team who have that extra bit of brain space to do it. While we don't have that intuition, we're building it up through all these projects. A really good example, we looked at a project recently where we're going to try and expose the timber in a residential building, which is super tricky for reasons just discussed, Building Safety Act and fire testing and all that kind of good stuff. Exposing timber should feel like an easy win in terms of carbon, because all of a sudden we don't have a ceiling to put in. That's less stuff. That's a nice, easy win. But actually, we've got to put more stuff on the top of it. So we might actually not save any carbon by exposing the ceiling.
Yeah.
And, even for me, I spend a lot of time thinking about embodied carbon materials, right? That was a bit of a surprise. You're sitting there in the team going like, what? It might not be that much better. But it comes back then to a value judgment. It's that kind of open discussion to say, okay, well, what's the value of exposing the timber? Is it offset that? And we're always going to be making this kind of value discussions about where it sits. How much does it cost? How buildable is it? Does it make it saleable more in the future or whatever else? Yeah, really tricky. So we just don't have that intuition, I think.
How do we get out of this intuition? I mean, other than data, when you see design teams collaborating now, what should be their attitude going into projects to allow them to be making not just the same decision they've made every time?
Yeah, I think there's a really natural thing for a lot of professionals, and it's not architects or engineers, it's across the industry, to think they know the answers to everything. And I think there's a kind of presumption that they feel they have to say that. But actually, we should really be creating a kind of safe place within projects for people to test and explore stuff. So saying you don't know, going like, I don't know, actually, and spending a bit of time and having to think about it is great. What we used to do laugh about at FCB is, if you didn't know the answer, you keep asking until you find somebody who knows the answer. And if you really don't know the answer and can't find anybody else, that's when you pay for a PhD student. So that's it. It's that inquisitiveness, research focus. I think that's the essential bit.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe Jack. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Ollie. It's been brilliant. Thanks for having me on.